Hello, this is Debbie McAllister, and this is Light Up Your Worth. Boy, am I excited for our guest today, and so are you. Once you meet Rachelle Lapham, she's an ordained minister, a professional psychic or medium, or clairvoyant healer, a psychic detective, and she's also the podcast host of the Psychic. And I was almost going to say sleuth, and it's not sleuth.
Sleuth, it's sleuth.
The sleuth. And she's also the author of a book called R&R, which is a love twin flame story. And she's also a dog lover. So y'all, if you guys hear the dogs barking every once in a while on either one of our side, you know that we're just calling it up front. So welcome, Rachelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for us to dig in. And, you have such a unique background of different types of areas of how you're using all of your gifts.
Yes.
And it really is beautiful way for you to be able to serve other people. And I wanted to start us out and have us talk about your book that you published called R&R,
It's R
about
and R love.
R&R love.
Yeah.
And to talk about what is actually a twin flame, and maybe have you explain a little bit about what the book is.
Okay. So the reason that I wrote my book was to help people kind of understand what a twin flame was, to understand the aspects of most twin flames relationships because they're not usually easy relationships. And to try to also help people to understand addiction and other things from a spiritual standpoint. So I wrote it basically with my husband in spirit, who is my twin flame, and it's basically our story of how we met, how things were when we were together, our twin flame story, how we felt about each other. It's one of those magnetic kind of relationships, the ones that you really can't get away from, because you are like it's like your other half. So you basically, it's said that you share a soul, you mirror one another. But what I've learned is that they usually have life lessons, like really hard life lessons, but also they're here to do work together. But the problem is that, and I've noticed it's not always the male, but most of the time it is the male that will struggle the most with the union and with their life struggles, mostly with addiction or something like that, because they say that one happy twin flame couple um, is like all of Europe attaining enlightenment. So it's a lot of light. So the dark really doesn't want that union to happen. Um, that's just what I learned. They try to keep them apart. So there's always seems to be spiritual attacks on a twin flame, besides the hard lessons that they choose. So it's very it can be very volatile relationship, um but also very powerful. It's one of those relationships that the love is very deep, but that sometimes it can be kind of toxic. um so it's just kind of that understanding, and how when someone passes away with certain addictions and certain things, how they are on the other side and how they can reconnect back to you. So it's basically just our story of being, together in life, and then how he is on the other side and how we're still connected.
Mhm.
That's basically what the story's about.
Oh, well, that's nice about because you are helping people through their grief with your gifts of being a
Yes.
psychic,
Hmm.
making those heart to heart connections. And to be able to help people through that. I'd love to be able to hear more about how you, began to do that, and then maybe some of the people that you've been able to help.
Well, it all started with his passing, really. Like I said, twin flames, I didn't know anything about any of this before he passed away. Wasn't on the spiritual side. I was raised Christian. I always believed in God. I was always really, really close to that kind of faith. But I didn't know really what happened when someone passed away. I had lost my grandma. That was my biggest loss in my life up to that point. And so when I met him, my world kind of got flipped upside down. And when I say it was one of those earth-shaking moments, when you meet somebody, that's really, it was really powerful. That's really how it was. And I could not understand because he was not the type that I went for. He was not, usually I would run away from that kind of thing. And it was just one of those, I didn't understand the connection and why we were so drawn to one another. And no matter what, we had to be talking or whatever. I didn't understand it. But I seemed to get more psychic with that union. I would be able to tell certain things he was doing, or if he was going, something was going to go wrong. It was almost like it ignited something. And I still at that point didn't even know what was going on. Until he ended up passing away. And after he passed away, I really, really wanted to connect with him. And I wanted to understand where he was and what was going on, and if he was sorry for what had happened and all this stuff. I just had all these questions all of a sudden about the other side. And I kind of prayed about it, and I asked, if there was any possible way, God, can you help me connect to him? And people got thrown in my life. It started with one medium, and she came in and she told me a lot of stuff she couldn't have known. And she really helped me a lot. And it was almost like something lit up in me. Well, I want to do this. Is it possible for me to be able to do this? And it was from then on, I just got thrown mentor after mentor. She became a really good friend of mine, and she told me, she said, you need to be doing readings. And at that point I was like, what? I need to be doing readings? What do you mean? I don't know anything about this. So she kind of guided me to work with cards and to start auto writing. Another one taught me to kind of do auto writing. So I would auto write my husband. I would auto write, our guides and our ascended masters. And I started learning everything I could about basically the other side and about how to connect to it. And then the mentor told me that we were twin flames. And once I started learning about that, everything made sense, from the numerology, because there's certain numerology with twin flames. There's certain, signs that are there. So it all started to make sense. Then I kind of understood, well, all right, now I understand the pool. Now I understand why we went through so much together. And yet it was one of those things where I was never upset at him for whatever we had went through. And so from then on, I just kept growing. It would come a little at a time. I had some scary experiences, but I also had some good experiences, and I started doing card readings for free, and people would tell me they were really accurate. And then from there, I opened up a grief group, and I thought, I really wanted to help people the way that I was helped, even if it was just to talk about their grief or whatever. So I opened this grief group, and it grew really big, really fast. And at first we were just talking about our grief, and I was trying to help people, but I was channeling, and I didn't realize I was channeling. Like I was helping them, and I was saying all this stuff, but I didn't know where it was coming from. And it was really helpful to them. And it was just, these words would just come out. I was like, where is this coming from? This wisdom that I didn't know was there. So I was actually channeling. And then I did my first reading. I was talking to a lady, and I said, I've never done a reading before, but can I just tell you what I'm getting? Do you mind if I do one for you? And she said, no, go ahead. And I don't remember my readings really much unless something sticks out. And the one thing I do remember is I had gotten mashed potatoes, and it was so off the wall that I didn't really know why the heck I was getting it. But I said it to her, and she said, well, I'm standing right here cooking mashed potatoes at this moment. And that was my moment where I was like, well, wow, how the heck did I know that? And all the other stuff that I knew there was no way I could know. And so from there it went. I started doing a lot of free readings and practicing a lot and getting my, figuring out how I connected to spirit and how to do the readings. And just from there, it went on. So 10 years later, here I am now.
So do you connect with, and help me pronounce this, like clairvoyant?
Yeah, clairvoyant.
What?
It's I connect to most of, like, I basically use all my clairs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of us, everybody's gifted differently. We don't all work the same, but I tend to work with everything. And I feel like every spirit has their more, their own way of working with me, and sometimes they work a little different. Sometimes more will work with my vision, which is my clairvoyant. It's an inner vision, and some will work more with my hearing. And those two kind of came in together. But I've always been, I guess, clairvoyant. I've always had really vivid dreams, which is a sign of clairvoyance. I've always been able to, if you stand there and explain something to me, I can play it all in my head. That's another sign of clairvoyance. So I've always been a very visual person. And I think that's where my clairvoyance came in at. I was always visual, and I didn't realize that it connected to this part of me. And so we went from, that's the two that I noticed the most. But clairvoyance is like, I'll see symbols, because spirit has their own communication with everybody that they work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll see, they work a lot of symbolism. I'll see symbols. Sometimes I'll see it like a movie, like it'll play out from one thing to another. Sometimes I'll see like just pictures of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, that's the way my clairvoyance works. It's all inner seeing. And then I hear mostly in my head. I'll hear words or phrases, or like I'll be channeling a full out paragraph. Some of my book is actually channeled. And claircognizance, that's where an inner knowing. So I'll just know stuff and I'll just say it and it'll be right. And clairsentient, that's like feeling with your body. That's like if you can walk into a room and you can feel like there's been a tense, it's tense in there. Or you get the chills or tingles a lot, like if you're around a haunted house or around spiritual energy, like you're feeling the energy with your body. And like, for instance, when we first came on here, I call it halo crawls, because it's all chills in my head.
Uh-huh.
And the moment that we started, I've got all these chills right here. And so that's just my clairsentient, just, you know, connecting. That's not my strongest, but it has grown a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things, like if I go in a haunted house, I'll feel the heaviness or
Mm-hmm.
the pain or whatever. And that goes into my readings, because sometimes spirit will give me the pain that they felt, not to the extent that they felt it, but I'll get an idea, so that I can explain it to my sitter, which is my client, and they can say, oh yeah, well, that makes sense, and this is why.
Yeah.
So it all kind of works hand in hand with the way that I work. um
Well, that was a really good explanation to help people understand if they're learning about all the different clairs, and some real practical examples. Like when you talk about going into a haunted house, I can't go anywhere near that kind of stuff anymore. Like people want to go, like I went to this underground tour of Seattle several years ago. I mean, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I remember because it's all before everything was built up in Seattle, so it's all underground. And I just I just wanted like certain parts of it. I'm like, oh
mhm.
man, this is not a good area. There's some shit that happened here.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
I don't know what happened. I just know that it's like, ugh, we got to go.
so your clairsentient is picking up that energy. You're feeling the energy with your body. I
Mm-hmm.
just realized that since mine has opened up more, I can't really go in a hospital now. Uh, my son had to go there because he was having this pain. I knew it was like a pulled muscle, but you know how kids are, they
Mm-hmm.
think they're dying. And so we went in there and I'm having these pains all over, and I hadn't been to a hospital since I moved out here, and everything kind of got a little bit stronger in that area. And man, I was getting pains all over. And it wasn't me, it was just there. It was from I guess the pain that people were feeling, even even if they were alive.
Yeah.
And so I do pick that up too sometimes.
Oh, yeah. When I lived in Reno, I worked at a healthcare system that had an old ER system. So when COVID happened, that's where I lived. And we were going down to help take a look at some supplies that were like being stored. And it was the old OR. And when I walked through there, oh man,
Mm.
I just felt all this, yeah, pain,
Mhm.
like this super uncomfortable feeling. And I'm in a corporate environment. It's not like I can say anything. But then before that, I worked in a locked psych facility for
Oh, wow.
teenagers in Reno. And I was their risk director. And I like it was exhausting being in there because I could actually feel, not all of theirs, but I could feel if they were actually feeling stuff, I could feel what all these kids were feeling. And I didn't last there, little
Yeah.
less than a year
Your
because
clairsentient
it
is
was
pretty strong then.
way too sensitive. I was like, oh, get me out of here. The same thing if I go looking to buy a new house, you'll walk in and you're like, nope, let's go.
Yeah.
I don't even need to see the house. I don't care what it looks like. Like, nope,
Right.
not my house.
Well, your clairsentient's pretty strong then to be
Hmm.
able to feel that, the energies in the houses and stuff.
Yeah. Or walking into
Probably
the
wouldn't
meeting.
probably wouldn't do very well at Tombstone then.
No, not at all. No. But the fascinating thing is that I'm interested in going to like historical sites because
Which are
I just
usually
think,
haunted.
and they have like this to like figure out, like, I can feel the empathy for the people at those experiences. And I feel like they are more of like picking up your own parts and pieces of yourself that were there. And then, and just kind of, picking up any aspects of myself. I have found when I've done so much traveling over the world is that actually brought a lot of healing with being able to do that. So I love all of your explanations of that. So then you were able to then start working with people in your grief group, and how does that show up? I mentioned that because, just so you know, is that I had a sister. She's still my sister, but she OD'd probably, what year was it? 2013, I think it was. My sister OD'd, and I actually did connect with somebody with her because I wasn't all that sad. Like when I think about it, I'm not all that sad because I know she found peace.
Hmm.
And because she had struggled for so long,
Yeah.
from like 13 to like 40 when she passed. And so
Yeah.
I love that you're able to help people kind of like tie up loose ends, I guess,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
ask those questions to help bring them peace.
Yeah, and the thing is I'm like a very non-judgmental person
Hmm.
because I know that everybody comes here with their own lessons and their own hardships, and plus I've been through a lot myself, like, with my husband, he had really strong addictions and things like that. I've had it in my family. So I kind of understand that I'm non-judgmental just about everything.
Hmm.
So I've basically, seen just about every situation in my readings, and people do walk away feeling better. They always tell me they feel better, and I don't know if that's the healer in me that's able to kind of heal them at the same time, because it's almost like they have a shift in their grief after having a session with me,
Hmm.
to where they just kind of, their thinking changes, and they kind of just like,
Yeah. So dog lovers will know that we're
sorry.
having that momentary moment of dogs. That's okay.
They were so quiet when we started. I
Yeah.
don't but
We'll just send them energy.
yeah, but it's one of those things where I noticed the shift, and I've had lots of skeptics come to me now. The skeptics make me nervous because I just get nervous. I'm like, what if I can't like bring in what I need to bring in? I kind of almost block myself. But you know what? Spirit has never let me down on a skeptic. and they seem to come through even stronger and give all this mind-blowing information that there's no way I could know. I mean, I had this client, I knew she was a skeptic. She didn't tell me, but I just knew it. And she said it changed her whole life, that one reading.
Wow.
She had been stuck in her grief with her brother for years, ever since he passed, and she just could not get over it. And it was almost like she shifted her thinking, and she shifted the way that um she looked at it, and she
Mhm.
had answers that she needed, and she knew he was okay. So I think I always say everybody should have at least one really good reading in their life, if
Mhm.
they're open to it, because I really do think that it does help the grieving process, to know that our loved ones are okay on the other side.
Mhm. I agree. I had a friend, die in a really tragic, car accident when we were, I think, 20. So still young, 20,
Yeah.
21 age, really instant, really bad, and, struggled with it. Mute myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say I
I'm
saw
like,
you
"That
on
was weird.
mute.
What are you here?" I mean, um, that's never happened, muting myself. So and struggled, with his passing because it was I was so young, so tragic, and, I ended up having a reading with him many, many years ago, and it really did I'm bringing up all these people now that we're talking about it. I'm like, "Oh, I'm remembering all these people," and the ones that I've actually gone out and had somebody help me with that, it really did make a difference.
Mhm.
Really, really did, like, why did you have to go so freaking young?
Yeah.
Like, what happened there, right? Like, what the fuck? I remember because I was angry, right? When you're young, you're like, everything's just
Mhm.
starting and then it's over. You're like, what in the world? You're my best friend. Like, you can't go.
Yeah.
You missed all this beautiful stuff. And um but what I realized is that in connecting with him was that he's always here.
Yeah.
He stayed and for a long time, and he had he had fulfilled his purpose. If he had stayed, my life wouldn't have shifted
Mhm.
with what was going on at the time. He actually that was the wake-up call to change behaviors. And but that doesn't help you when when you're feeling the pain. And so
Yeah.
um I love that you're able to do that. Now, is your podcast then, the Psychic Sleuth? Did I say it right again? I
Yes.
wanna say sloth, the animal, but so I'm having to, like, correct myself.
Sleuth, just think of, like, the sleuthing, like detective, like that's what they used to be called. They used to be called sleuths.
Mhm.
So that's where
Hmm.
I got it from. It just popped in my head one day.
Oh, it's guided, right?
Yeah.
You didn't think of it. You
Nope.
channeled it. So
I was
tell me.
always into like the Columbo things with my grandma when I was younger.
Mm,
We were always watching Columbo trying to figure out what happened. So I think that might be one reason I'm kind of drawn to the true crime part of it. I'm a detective in a different way,
mhm.
and I don't have to go to law school for it.
Yeah. Right? So, now what do you got what are your episodes about on the podcast then? How do you pull all of this together in that, forum?
Well, I have a co-host named Natalie, but actually I did have a different co-host. So I did have a different podcast. It was called the same thing. And I don't know, he just ran out of time. He couldn't do it anymore. But I
Mhm.
had a lot of episodes on that one. I think you can still find it on Google or iHeart. But my friend contacted me and I had known her for a while, and she said, I really want to do the podcast with you. I want to get it restarted again. So she kind of looked into the computer stuff, and so she's my co-host. She does all the editing and whatnot. And we were doing it weekly, but sometimes we get off track. But it's basically just a working missing persons and unsolved cases, and just giving what I get for that, for those cases. Um
Oh, so you pull up a case. You guys go find a
I don't know anything
cold
about what
case?
she gives me. She
Oh.
goes and looks up the case,
Oh.
and all she does is send me a picture. I don't know anything about the case at that time. I don't know nothing. Um So I go in completely blind, just working off of a picture that she sends
Mhm.
me. So that's why we kind of keep the integrity of it, because a lot of the stuff that I get, sometimes people have said, "Oh, you looked that up." No, I try to go in every case blind. I try not to know anything at all, and that makes the reading pure, because sometimes our mind can interfere, right? If
Mhm.
we know or have heard something, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between what we're getting psychically and what our mind is telling us. What we think. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. And so that's one reason I try to go in blind. I don't like to be led by any kind of information. But that's basically what the podcast is.
Wow. So it's a mix of crime and the psychic.
Yep.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Really fascinating. Is there one of the cases or that you've had um now that it's been out there on a podcast that you could share with us or
Well, the podcast is the same thing as my YouTube, basically. I do the same thing on my YouTube.
Mhm.
And I just work cases that I kind of like to be guided. People will suggest things, and sometimes I do get to that case. And sometimes, it'll come up later. It comes up in the timing it's supposed to come up, is the way I look at it.
Mhm.
So, um let's see, with I'm trying to think of the case. Okay, so there's one that I did, I think it's like 2 episodes back, or maybe 1, in Amber Lee. I can't remember her whole name. A lot of information I got on that. It was really mind-blowing, because the house and the place I described actually existed. It was actually exactly where I said it was. All the facts that were known, I ended up getting in that. So that was a very good reading. And let's see, on my YouTube, Riker, I don't know if you've heard about that. That one was recently. Um, he was found alive after being missing for, I think it was 2.5 days, almost 3 days. And I had said basically he was within 3 miles. I described it, and said he was in a shed, and he was hiding in a shed about 2.4 miles away from his home. So that one was kind of memorable to me because he was found alive, and he was okay. But it was crazy because I got information on him 3 years ago in a different case that's very similar. The boys were very similar. Um, Spirit works with me kind of weird sometimes. They kind of confuse me with the way they work with me, because I don't see that they work with anybody else this way, but I call them interconnects. And it's almost like patterns in cases, where similar cases they kind of connect, but at different times.
Mhm.
And so I'll get information and future information in the similar case before that case ever comes up. So that's kind of weird. It's
Oh,
kind of weird. And so once we see it, we're like, whoa.
so do you have to then distinguish if it this case
Yeah,
or if
sometimes
it's
I
some
do.
other uh-huh.
Yeah. I try to stay as focused as I can, but they do everything for a reason. If they connect them that way, sometimes they
Mhm.
fit both cases, and sometimes it'll come in before I ever get that case. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just a validation thing or what, but um I worked Kenneth Howard 3 years before, and stuff for Riker came in that case, and he wasn't even born yet. Um or he was just born that year, depending on when his birthday was, and then 3 years later he goes missing, and I already had the information. And Kenneth Howard, yeah, that was pretty mind-blowing. I actually, when I did the reading on YouTube, they kept telling me that case, because they will reference cases to me to say it's like this or it's similar to this, and it can be cases that I've watched on TV, to
Mhm.
kind of show me the similarities, or that things are like this. And so I went back to that reading, and I looked at it, and I had gotten a shed back then too. And it really did fit. And the kids look so similar. And they were both around the same age. They both wandered off from home. It was basically a copycat case. So that was the most trippy one, I think, from YouTube.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the Amber Lee. What's that? What was
Amberly, I cannot remember her last name. I'm
Mhm.
horrible with names. It's a very old cold case. I think it's about 20 years old. Someone came in her bedroom and murdered her, and they've never caught anybody for it. So that was just a cold case that she thought would be good to look at and see if there was anything I could get on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's on the podcast. So that was a really good one because there was a lot of validation in that one.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So if somebody is listening and they're thinking, wow, I'd like to get some, if they know of somebody who has been harmed or somebody who has passed and they want to be able to connect maybe and figure out some of those questions, right? To bring themselves peace or know that their past loved one is okay.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
should reach out to you.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, like, I always tell people, especially when it comes to missing persons and open cases, like, I can never promise anything
Mhm.
because I don't know what I'm gonna get. I just give what spirit gives and hopefully it's enough. Like, I can't get all the answers, unfortunately. I wish I was a mystical being and I could tell you tell you everything,
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't work that way, Spirit gives what they give for the reason that they give it. And um usually usually my stuff, it fits. It usually fits. It usually does help. Um and definitely, for just a regular passing or any kind of passing where they're not looking for anybody, it's definitely a good way to start your healing process. Because when I lost my husband, that was my second biggest loss in my life. And uh I had a lot of mediums help me through it, and I needed that. I needed that communication with him to kind of understand everything, understand the connection we had, understand why he left, because he dealt with addiction most of his life. And that addiction it's hard chains to break, you know.
Mhm.
So it does help just from my own experience and having my own readings done, and then watching my clients transform, from these really grieving people to just like all of a sudden they just feel so much better because they heard from their loved one, they know they're okay. And there's the way that my readings work is there's so much validation in there that you kind of can't say, oh, she's just, putting me on and just telling me this. There's no way I could know that not stuff you can Google, because a lot of people say, well, psychics Google. No, I don't Google anything. I don't have the time to sit there and Google stuff about people. And what do you Google? Like names and numbers? I mean, this is like personal stuff that you cannot find anywhere. And I don't look at people's, pages or anything like that. I try to just go in as blind as I can and not know anything,
Mhm. So
you
do
know.
they usually, like, provide you a picture
Yeah,
or
just a picture.
Uh-huh.
Um, and actually I prefer to do a lot of my private readings through Messenger or a messenger type thing because
Mhm.
I started my gifts writing, auto writing, and I feel like I connect deeper on that level because it's just me and spirit. And then people can go back and reread it and keep that. It's a way that they can hang on to that reading. And so that's why I like to do it that way. Um, I'm not the best tech savvy person. I mean, I can do telephone readings, I can do Skype because obviously I on my YouTube I do have mediumship readings that I've done
Mhm.
on lives, and then we've cut the readings out and posted them as separate readings. I just don't. I mean, I can connect. I can do it that way. I just feel like I get more specific, deeper information in my typed readings. Why? I
Mhm.
don't know. It's just a different way of connecting, I guess.
Yeah. I've met another, medium who actually that's the only way that she does them. Is almost exactly with what you're saying,
Hmm.
is she's able to just sit there and it just comes through, and then you have a typed version of it, and,
Hmm.
you feel connected with it. Hers is with animals, she connects with animals, um,
I
but
can do
that's
that.
exactly
Deceased ones. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Really?
Yeah.
You can do that with deceased ones?
Yes.
Oh my
I've
gosh.
always wanted to kind of learn animal communication. I haven't really opened
Mhm.
that up yet. Well, at
Yeah.
least with my own, I've been able to give readings. Like if someone asks me, well, what's going on with my dog
Mhm.
medically or this, like I can do that.
Mhm.
I can't seem to connect with my own, but
Yeah.
I can connect with deceased ones. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they
Mhm.
have a soul and a spirit just like humans do. So they communicate the same way. And a lot of my pet readings, they've been life changing too because we all know it's really hard to lose a pet.
Mhm.
Um, because I think that's because they're there all the time. They're always there for us. They're there all the time. So when their presence is gone, we miss it more. And they do give that unconditional love. So it is, losing pets are really hard. And
Yeah.
those reading, they do help, you
Mhm.
know.
I would 2000% agree. When I started this podcast on February 27th, 2021, I had 2 dogs. So, almost at the end of every podcast, they got rambunctious. So, and then that was, and then on July 1st last year, he transitioned. And he had been sick for a while, and I knew that. I knew at,
Mhm.
at a level I can't explain that he was, but when I connected in with him, it was more of I wasn't ready yet. So
Yeah.
he hung around for 11 years and he had been sick for a while. But it got to where it was really obvious. And like now I have my girl laying on my feet and I know there's something not right there.
Yeah.
But she's hanging out for me too, right? Like she took over she gathered the torch, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Of hanging out with mom until mom's ready. So it's super powerful for people to be able to for you really to be able to help people through that because they are so attached to us. They're part
And
of
they
our
do choose
lives.
us. They
Uh-huh.
choose us. Anytime an animal enters your life, it's not on accident. We make soul contracts with them the same way that we make it with people. So if an animal enters your life, you're supposed to be with that animal. And
Mhm.
a lot of people struggle with, oh, I had to put him to sleep. I feel like I failed him. That's our last act of love is to let them go. Unfortunately, they can't live their physical life forever, just like people can't. And they appreciate that. That's like, us letting them go in a
Mhm.
certain in a physical way, but they're never gone. They're always there, which is hard to understand from a human perspective. From a human perspective, if we don't see something, we don't think it's there. And that's just our humanity and our human
Mhm.
mind, the way that we work. And but they're always around. And
Mhm.
sometimes they come back in others.
Yeah. Yeah, what's so interesting about the girl I have now, her name is Lily, and she's all over my social, by the way, because I'm a empty nester. And so,
Me
she
too.
has a lot of, characteristics, though, of a dog that I had named Shiloh, who was like the girl I never had. It was in the dog form, right? And then this one has so many, there's so many years in between both of them being in my life, but, Lily's 9 now, and I think I've had her since she was, like, 4 or 5 months old, but I feel like she is, almost like a daughter in some ways, and I know that may sound a little unrealistic to people, but, um, I never had a daughter, like, that I birthed, and so,
Uh-huh.
she kind of fills that spot. I you don't know how to explain it, right?
Yeah.
But, we're just deeply connected, and I know a lot of intuitive people are really extra connected with their pets,
Mhm.
whether it's a horse or a goat or a
I think I've
chicken.
cried over more losing my pets than I have people.
Mhm.
And that's just because they're always there,
Yeah.
you know? And you're taking care of them like a caretaker, like
Mhm.
you would your children. Well, the good people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have one that's 16 right now. So
Oh, that's tough.
yeah, yeah, she's a good dog.
Mhm.
So we're getting there, and I don't even want to think about it at this point. At this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. I mean, it's the same way, that when you connect to a human and you connect to an animal, it's I think it just shifts our thinking, a little bit.
Mhm.
When we get that proof that they're okay on the other side, or that the other side exists, or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I feel honored to have that kind of gift and to be able to do that for the people that I've helped, because I've helped a lot of people, and they come to me all the time and tell me that, and it makes me feel good for them, you know what I mean, that I was able to do that for them and help in their grieving process, because I think we've all had a grieving process, and it's not an easy thing to go through.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I had a session, not with you, but I had a session with somebody who actually does connect with people on the other side, and I was going to connect to my grandmother, and because I had some questions, and my dad showed up, and it ended up he like shared, like I was like this hot mess, like oh my gosh,
yeah.
ugly cry, and he he came and he shared some stuff, through her that completely like I don't feel sad now. And I had been sad for at least 5 years since he had passed. Um and it really made a huge impact. It,
Well, you needed that message.
yeah.
That's why he came through. And that's, see, I I connect to two different ways. I like to connect through a picture, because if I just pull whoever, it kind of gets like a free free for all sometimes. I did that. I had my friend, he came on my live and he was like, just give me what you get. And then was pulling through military buddies, and we pulled through like 5 different people. And it's like you only get a little from each person. So I like to direct dial, what's what I call it. Like I like to call up the person by using a picture, and could just give you a really good reading on that one person. Otherwise, it can get kind of mixed up and kind of crazy. But I have had times, I was giving a reading to someone not long ago, and she was wanting to connect to her dad, but this grandma showed up, this like really loud, like very big personality, and she didn't know anything about the grandma, but the grandma
Oh.
really wanted to be heard for some reason. And I haven't really had that happen in any of my readings before. So
Mhm.
that was the first, really. Because usually if I dial direct, I usually get who I'm asking for.
Mhm.
Um, unless I just don't use a picture. Because I can use a name too, but I just prefer a picture because it's a better connection.
Mhm.
And yeah, whenever they do that, that means you're supposed to get a message from that person. And some people, like Matt Frazier and those, they can, that's how they connect. Um, and they say they can't direct dial. So I think that's what I mean when we all work kind of differently. But
Mhm.
I just prefer direct dial, because otherwise it can get a little crazy.
Yeah.
It can get a little crazy bringing through, 5 people at a time.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, and I was trying to remember if we even recorded that session, but there was stuff shared that I don't even remember what was shared, right? And it was last year, and more the beginning of last year. But I really did need to hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
Like, because I grieved him more than anybody, and I've lost a lot of people and through death. And um, but his was extremely hard.
They
Extremely
always seem
hard.
to know. They
Mhm.
always seem to know what to say, and that's because they know it's in your heart and your mind. And so they know what they need to tell you. They know the message that they need to give. And I think that's why you got what you needed from it.
Yeah. No, I'm getting all Terry, I miss my dad.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away no matter how old you are, I
Yeah.
think.
We just kind of learn to live with it until we're with them again.
Yeah,
I'm
but
like that with my grandma sometimes, because she basically raised me, and I'm most like her, so I identify most with her.
mhm,
And I lost her really young. I was like in my 20s before my son was born. And so there's times I think back, like, well, I wonder what it would have been like if she was here, through his birth and everything. So yeah, I feel you. It is something
yeah.
that's hard to get over, but I think that knowing that they're okay on the other side and they don't really
Mhm,
leave us, and the signs that we can receive, because my husband's been very good at signs, and like I said, they're all different. Sometimes they give these big wow signs, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's
mhm,
just, a thought or a memory that enters your head, that's them, that's telling you that they're there. Like, those memories that you get in of your dad every once in a while, that's just him
yeah,
saying hello. And so sometimes it's very small, and
mhm,
people will say, well, why am I not getting signs? It's because they're not seeing them, or they're not realizing that it's a sign.
mhm,
Like even just a song that pops on the radio that reminds you of somebody or something.
yeah,
um my husband was always really big, and actually I haven't had anything major from him in about I'd say 8 years. He was very big with signs for the first year or so and
Mhm.
feeling his presence and all of that. But just recently, I had like one of those wow things happen, and I was being held while I slept, and it was like I could it was like a human was holding me.
Wow.
Like, and you could feel like you were if you were facing someone and they
Mhm.
were holding you, like kind of hugging you while you're sleeping.
Mhm.
That's kind of how it was, and that he hasn't done anything like that in about 8 years. But that's what I mean. Like sometimes they can go a while and then they'll do something wow like that. But see, his birthday's in a few days, so they do like to come around those moments and tend to give more signs or if there's something going on in your life.
Mhm.
But he was always really big about making his presence known, so he's still like that. It was one of those things like you're gonna know it's me when you wake up. You're gonna remember it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
And do you find that I have found that I get like those memories, but like I get a lot of communication. Um I feel like when I'm sleeping and I'll remember parts of it or not parts of it, or like what you're talking about with like the song or a random memory that you hadn't thought about in like
Mhm.
long time. Like a
Yep.
memory you forgot. You were like 6 years old and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, that's where I got that from. And then you're like, where did that come from? Like,
That's them.
yeah.
Yep, that's them saying, "Hey, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here." That's just or if you see somebody that kind of looks like or reminds you of that person,
Mm-hmm.
that's even a sign. Or, a certain song that maybe he liked or you liked or reminds you of them. Anything that reminds you of them is usually them.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, it's not this huge thing like you're gonna see him standing right there. I think people expect those kind of signs are like these visitation dreams, and just because we're not remembering our visitation dream doesn't mean they're not visiting us when we're sleeping. It's just sometimes we just don't remember it. But those times where it feels like you actually visited with them and you remember basically everything very vividly when
Mm-hmm.
you wake up, those are real visitation dreams. Mine wasn't really a dream. Mine was like he was there.
Yeah.
His presence was there. And I was sort of like in the middle of like half awake, half asleep. Like his presence kind of woke me up, but like I realized what was going on, and I was just like, and then so I kind of thought about it throughout the night as I was sleeping until I woke up, and I was like, wow. It was one of those things like I didn't realize it at the time until I woke up. But sometimes they give the big ones, but most of the time it's very subtle,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, that is like some really practical things I think for people to understand when they've had somebody who's passed and if they're looking for those signs
Mhm.
of, are they still here? I mean, can you even do something as simple as just asking them, can you show me a sign that you're here? I could,
Yeah,
do
you
they
can, but
respond to that or?
you can, but I mean, and sometimes you get it and sometimes they try to send it or maybe you miss it. You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can ask for a sign and see what you get. Be very specific with it so that you know it's from them. You
Yeah.
can do that with your guides too.
Hmm.
you know you can tell them to send you like a giraffe or something. Not that they're going to really send you a giraffe, but you might see a stuffed animal giraffe or something like that where you don't normally see a giraffe and you
Hmm.
haven't seen one in a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to be really specific
Yeah.
with it.
I like that. So if people are interested in reaching out with you, Rachel, how can they reach you?
Okay, so I have a group called the Psychic Sleuth podcast. It's on Facebook, so you can join that, answer the questions. You can reach out to me through there. I have an Instagram under the Psychic Sleuth, and I have a TikTok. It's not very huge right now, but it's there. It's the Psychic Sleuth on there, and then I have my YouTube, the Psychic Sleuth. Um, and that's I go on there sometimes and I do live readings, and then I usually work cases and whatnot on there. And then I have an email, the psychic sleuth at gmail.com.
And then they can reach out to you even through any of those avenues, I guess, to reach you to do a reading.
Yes.
And
To do a reading, or if you have a missing persons case or uh, an open case or something like that from a loved one, which
Mhm.
I try not to charge for, but people, if people want to donate, they can, but I try to help whatever way I can with those. Because I can't ever really promise, I can't promise an outcome because
Mhm.
it's going to be up to, law enforcement and all that in the long run. Um, so yeah, those are the best ways. And then my book's on Amazon.
Mhm. And I'll put a link in. So in the show notes, we'll put all of those links so that people can just go over, and it will be on her episode page as well, the show notes, and then we'll put a link to on Amazon for the Amazon link for your book, R&R Love. So,
Yeah, it's R&R Love and then dash a twin flame story.
okay. I'll make sure that we get it right, and we'll go pull in the Amazon
Just
link
so
for
that
them.
it pops up on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to correct that
And
too.
I think it's you can get the book and you can also, and that's self-published. I'm gonna eventually try to get it published, but that's just a self-published version.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and you've just offered so much goodness to all of our readers. And it's wonderful to know that you're out there really making a difference and helping people.
I'm trying to. I mean, I really feel like this was my life path. It just took that loss to change directions. Because if I would have never met him and lost him, wouldn't be on this path. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah,
Like it put me on this direction, and through that happening, I've been able to help hundreds of people.
yeah,
Um, and that's feels like a life purpose to me. So I feel like I'm fulfilling my life purpose.
yeah, yeah. I think that's when one of the things that a lot of our guests have shared too is that when something that's unfortunate happens, is to take a look at the blessings or the learning opportunities that actually wouldn't have happened, unfortunately, but that they are a catalyst for uh, something else that's coming, or a lesson that really needed to be learned. So
Yep, that's true.
I'm
Definitely
glad you
true.
were able. I'm sorry that you lost your husband, but I'm glad you were able to find this part of yourself
Well,
and then help others.
I've
Hmm.
kind of learned that he just struggled too much in life, and it was almost like it saved him in a way. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He was just the addiction's so hard, and he just couldn't break it. He was with bad people, and who knows what was going to happen. So it was one of those things where it kind of helped both of our souls.
Hmm.
And so basically, he can love me more and help me more from the other side than he could here. And so that's how I've learned to look at it
Hmm.
through all my conversations and trying to understand and all of that. So,
Yeah.
and I know I can connect to him anytime I want to. I'll just sometimes randomly talk to him and he pops in my head. People probably think I'm crazy, but we have our own connections. So, yeah, and anybody can talk to their own loved ones. You don't need a medium to talk to a loved one. They hear everything you say.
Hmm.
And sometimes if you listen, you can hear them too. So,
Yeah.
just remember that.
Something to remember.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Rachel.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on, Debbie. I appreciate it.
Lots of fun.